Mikhail, welcome to Real Vision.
It's an honor to be here, Ash.
I'm really excited to do this walkthrough of ChatGPT with you. Before we get started, you're truly an expert on the space. Tell us a little bit about your background. First, start with your academic background.
I've been building neural networks for a very, very long time. I built really primitive ones as far back as the little TI-81 calculator. I specialized in artificial neural networks in my undergraduate studies, and then in my graduate studies, I studied biological neural networks, specifically aquatic invertebrates. Um, After college, I went to work at Microsoft in their speech recognition labs, working on some language models that are ancient ancestors of the kind of things that are being used in GPT today. That was my first real job. Prior to that, I also did a stint at a think tank called MITRE, where I worked on a language model for the purposes of having a computer pass the SATs on behalf of the Princeton Review Board. That was ancient history, but it'll become relevant as we explore more of what GPT is and how it works. During the war, I went to work for a military contractor that built networking devices that were designed to self-organize their networking topology. We likened it to a cell phone network without any cell towers, where the calls just kind of hop from phone to phone. And that gave me an opportunity to explore some of the same kind of math or concepts of some of these self-organizing data structures in a completely different manner. After that, I went to work. I took that expertise and used it in a social networking company in New York, where I was building systems that would analyze influence and connection degree, and would build recommendation engines based on who you might know and who might know you. That expertise in turn landed me at Google, where I spent several years working in their ad placement division. Since then, I've been freelancing primarily for a combination of hedge funds and biotech companies. I try to keep in touch with my academic roots by writing free software for the neurobiology community, specifically in the form of microscopy image analysis algorithms. And mostly my contracting nowadays is done through an outfit in Seattle called General UI, which keeps me engaged with a number of very interesting challenges.
Okay, not just a fascinating background, but an incredibly diverse one. Biological networks, working at a hedge fund, Google, Microsoft, really fascinating stuff. Listen, before we jump in here, I just want to make a couple of points. First, a disclosure. Most of the conversations you see here at Real Vision are totally spontaneous because of the technical nature of this conversation. Mikhail and I walked through this together beforehand. Second, this is going to be a tough one to listen to as audio only, as a podcast. We're going to show a lot on screen. So please take a look at the video if you're listening right now. Finally, if you have to watch this one a couple of times, don't feel bad. It took me a while to get my head around all these ideas. This isn't just a description of AI. What you're going to see here is the real thing. We're actually going to dive in to ChatGPT and do a demo. It's not dumbed down. This is the real deal. Mikhail, with that said, let's jump right in.
Absolutely. I'll try to read on the screen what folks might want to hear in a podcast, but it's generally, you got to see it to believe it. A lot of you might have heard of this thing called ChatGPT. Some of you might have seen articles about it. A few of you might have actually taken it for a spin. A lot of you might be wondering what this is all about. GPT is a new artificial intelligence algorithm that was developed by a consortium called OpenAI. They're largely founded by a number of Silicon Valley bigwigs, largely from Y Combinator, a few folks from Elon Musk's outfits, and so on, including Elon Musk himself. I believe he founded it, but didn't stay on. The capabilities of this new artificial intelligence are nothing short of extraordinary. And what we're going to do today is show some of the things that it's capable of, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how it works and where things go from here. Let's start off by talking about GPT. What is it? It stands for General Pre-trained Transformer. those words aren't going to mean much right off the bat, but the acronym does come from somewhere. It's a large and powerful program that consumes enormous amounts of computing resources that's running on some Microsoft Azure data center somewhere, and you interface it through this web interface called ChatGPT. And this interface allows you to uh, leverage the capabilities that this technology has to offer. Just right off the bat, what we see here on the screen share is what you see when you go to the ChatGPT website. You can see it's at chat.openai.com, and you interact with this AI as if you were interacting with a human being through a chat interface, through a messaging app, or on your texting on your phone or something like that. GPT is what's called a large language model. Now, the holy grail of artificial intelligence for the last since the 1940s or so has been this concept called AGI, artificial general intelligence. The trick is that historically, AI has always been a set of algorithms that are dedicated to a specific task. Let's say play a game of chess, or spell check a document, or draw or navigate this road, or drive this car.
These
Um,
are sort of very predefined types of functions that have very narrow bounds and are therefore relatively easy for computers to calculate.
Exactly, and especially when chess algorithms were first developed, it resulted in a dramatic reevaluation of what we mean when we talk about the concept of intelligence. So as computers have been knocking out more and more things that we call intelligence, the concept of AGI, artificial general intelligence, has been getting pushed off farther and farther into the future, and now it's almost but not quite here. Um, I would be remiss to call GPT an actual general intelligence, but here's the thing. It is a language model. While other algorithms might be tasked with playing a game of chess, GPT is essentially autocomplete on steroids. It is a probabilistic model that determines in a stream of words what word is likeliest to come next, or what word a conversational participant is likely to want to hear next. This results in a few absolutely staggering ramifications. The issue is that humans evolved language approximately 150 to 200,000 years ago. We evolved written language about 10,000 years ago, and we evolved the internet about 40 years ago or so.
Right.
Now, the language by definition, is a system by which we can externalize our cognition and offload it to other thinking entities that are at least as powerful as ourselves. The whole point of being able to talk to someone is to be able to take a general thing that's in your wetware and transfer it to another person, and have that person transfer their neural activity back to you. In a very real sense, spoken language is like the Navi hookups in Avatar. We use sound waves instead of these weird little hair cable things. But we shouldn't understate just how powerful language really is. So a machine that is able to engage in a conversational manner with us ends up feeling like there's a mind in there. And when it's literally been seeded with the entire collected corpus of English language present on the internet today, it ends up being able to pass the test of of looking competent in an absolutely staggering degree.
Hi, I'm Raoul Pal, the CEO and co-founder of Real Vision. The financial world is a complicated world right now. It's a really complicated macro picture, and there's a lot of risks. Real Vision and our YouTube channel help you navigate those risks. So subscribe now to the channel and never miss an update. There is simply too much going on. So subscribe now. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's eerie, it's uncanny. It's the feeling when you're interacting with ChatGPT that it is, in fact, thinking in a way that we as humans have thought of as something that was exclusive to our own species. It's really unearthly. With that said, let's just dive right in and
Let's
take a
do it.
look at some of this.
I'm going to tell GPT a command. And like I said, you interact with it as though you were talking to a human being. So I'm going to first seed it with a prompt saying, you're a web marketing agent. This kind of puts it into the mindset of how I want it to reply. And I've prepared this prompt for it to tell it the task, write a marketing newsletter from a company called Ash's Seafood, in which you try to get the reader to buy eel pie. Now, I chose this prompt specifically in order to demonstrate that there is nothing up my sleeves. We can Google for Ash's Seafood eel pie, and nothing comes up. There's something about smoked fishes, but this is not this is not something that it can just Google for out on the internet.
Right.
So it has to be creating this as we see it.
In other words, it can't just go and grab a recipe and pull it in. It has to actually think it through, for lack of a better term. It has to use the logic to model it.
Exactly. And so here we see it popping up on the screen much faster than I can read it. Dear seafood lovers, spring is finally here, and we at Ash's Seafood are excited to introduce to you our latest addition to the menu, our delicious eel pie, made with the freshest ingredients, blah, blah, blah. This is exactly the kind of thing that you might receive in in your email inbox if you're subscribed to a newsletter from a company called Ash's Seafood. But you know what? Why stop there? Let's show just how capable this thing is. I'm going to give it the same prompt, but I'm going to upgrade it from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4. These different models, so these are different models that I'm selecting, and they have different capabilities. 3.5 is very fast, but is not very good at something that they call alignment. And hopefully we'll have time to talk about alignment later in this talk. It's a technical term that's used in the industry to describe how to get the computer to do what you meant it to do rather than what you told it to do.
Right.
And GPT-4 was specifically trained to align much better to requests. So let me ask it this. Write the entire newsletter as a song. I can type, sung to the tune of the Wellerman. Oh, there once was a pail of seafood delight that was cooked up in Ash's kitchen each night. The name of a dish is the eel pie we sell, and we sing of its taste for now you to retell. I've never seen this song before because it's literally making it up as it goes along. Soon may the eel pie come to satisfy all and then some. One taste and we swear we'll be craving for more. Soon may the eel pie come, a treat for the sea, to your home, which with Ash's Seafood promise quality ashore.
I mean, this, to me, let's pause here and talk about this because it's almost unearthly. For those of us who did not grow up with this, maybe when we watch this video in 10 years, it will all seem very much old hat. But it's shocking to see a system that's essentially generating what sounds exactly like marketing copy in the first instance that you find in your inbox with no actual referent for it to do this. This is all being constructed de novo here by the engine. And then when you tell it to do it in the language of a fisherman shanty, and it creates this in less than 15 seconds, it's just surreal.
It would take a human being days to write something like this. And It's not actually the best meter. Like, it doesn't actually maintain rhythm quite coherently because it doesn't hear what these things sound like, right? But it's a lot better than I could do in 15 seconds, I'll tell you what.
It's a lot better than I could do in probably 15 minutes or 15 hours or 15 days. It's this idea that it can do a first order approximation of just about anything. And by the way, we should say this is something that's chosen more or less at random. You could also tell it to write the marketing copy in the fashion of an Edgar Allan Poe poem, and it would generate copy as well.
Write the entire newsletter in the fashion of an Edgar Allan Poe poem. Is Edgar Allan Poe with an A or an E? I should know this. We were just visiting his childhood home Once upon a midnight dreary, while you pondered weak and weary over many a faint and forgotten meal of tasteless culinary lore, while you nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at your chamber door. "'Tis Ash's seafood," I muttered, tapping at your chamber door. Only this and nothing more. So it's unfortunately keeping very, very close to the original Poe poem. It's actually taking very few deviations from the Raven. So to that end, let me actually go to a different interface. This is the playground that is essentially, they call it the playground. It is a sort of a back-end testing area that developers can use in order to make sure that
So what we've just seen was the front end that most people would have access to. Now we're going sort of deeper into the machine here to take a look at what the developer interface looks like.
exactly. So I'm going to give it the same. I'm going to switch to chat. I'm going to give it to GPT. Tell it to use GPT-4. I'm going to crank up its maximum length, and here I'm going to. Yeah, it's still talking about. Still writing that poem. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it this prompt, and I'm going to move your web marketing agent over to something called a system prompt, and I'm going to crank something called the temperature way up. This can effectively be thought of as the creativity marker. Now,
so these are the back end controls that allow developers like yourself to actually modify the way the language model works.
exactly. Specifically, the temperature gauge determines how rigorously the generator adheres to the likeliest word that has the highest probability of coming next. By turning
So
the
the temperature
up,
at the inception by default was hewing very closely to what the predictive algorithm was telling it. Therefore, it emulated the Raven very closely, and now you're essentially increasing the degree of freedom with which it can interpret that prompt. And what we're seeing here is wow. This is really surreal. I mean, it sounds as though it was generated from a human intuition. I mean, it's just surreal.
it's taking a minute to crank out, and I can't quite scroll to the top while it's working. But here, I'll let it finish its last verse. For the folks that are listening on podcast, this is the way that the beginning differs is worth hearing. Once upon a midnight dreary, by the river's edge so eerie, a chef named Ash, with vision fateful, stirred a silky mystic broth. Sees them in the briny waters, serpents swimming, silvery daughters. In murky depths they swirl and saunter, waiting for the iron grasp. As you ponder, weak and weary, longing for a meal more cheery, mysterious and full of wonder, hearken now my tale of yonder. To the tendrils of the ocean we must delve and tame our notion, for the eel pie's magic potion lies in depths of art and craft. I kind of want to eat this meal now. I don't know.
Um, I kind of want to take out insurance on my job as a writer. I mean, you can imagine that if you're out there and you're involved in marketing, this is just a complete game changer, top to bottom.
The reason why I wanted to start with a marketing example is because marketing was absolutely the first industry. I don't want to say attacked, but attacked by these by the proliferation of these large language models. And it's worth a bit of a digression to note that GPT is not the first LLM to see the light of day, by the or even to have market influence. But GPT is probably one of the first to hit a degree of mainstream success that we're currently seeing, and it's one of the first to venture forth beyond marketing into a plethora of other industry uses. On that note, let me show another field that's being rocked by the existence of this algorithm.
By the way, you were right. It's 2 L's and an A.
Okay, good. Yeah, we're huge Edgar Allan Poe fans in this house, so for me to misspell that is like me misspelling my own name. So let's go through all that. Let's say Rothbardian economic policy could have. There. So
let's read through this prompt
yep.
and tell folks what we're doing here.
The prompt is, you're a college student who minored in history and majored in philosophy. Actually, let's say majored in economics.
Okay.
You're defending your graduate thesis. Discuss the role that Rothbardian economic policy could have played in the fall of the Roman Empire. This is a pure hypothetical that combines multiple highly detailed and highly it combines radically different fields, each of which require a great deal of detail and expertise in and of their own rights. And I think it's safe to say that there probably isn't a lot of precedent. There aren't a lot of existing essays out on the internet that talk about the role of Rothbardian economics in the fall of the Roman Empire.
Right, because Murray Rothbard was born some 1500 years after the fall of the Western Empire, so it's a contrived example. But the point here is there isn't any sort of data set. There's no Wikipedia article on Rothbardian economics leading to the decline and fall of the Roman Empire.
Exactly. So what it's about to produce, it has to produce, by its lonesome. So, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for being here today. My thesis, because we told it that you're defending your graduate thesis.
Right.
For those unfamiliar with the term, okay. So I'm not going to bore the podcast listeners with the boilerplate that usually has to start at the beginning of a graduate thesis defense. But then it goes on to say, first and foremost, I want to emphasize that this is a counterfactual analysis, meaning that we are analyzing a hypothetical situation that did not actually occur. The aim of this exercise is not to rewrite history. So it offers that.
This is exactly the point that I made. And
Yeah.
It's surreally at the top of when you entered the prompt.
So here it goes. Its first substance paragraph. One of the main factors contributing to the fall of the Roman Empire was its unstable monetary policy. The empire suffered from continuous debasement of its currency, the denarius, which led to inflation and economic instability. A Rothbardian approach would have advocated for the use of hard money, such as gold or silver coins, to maintain a stable currency. The adoption of a hard monetary policy could have curbed the rampant inflation and potentially prevented the economic collapse that contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. I'm a pretty fast reader, and it's cranking this out faster than I can say it.
And by the way, for anyone who has had the misfortune of reading a similar dissertation, it has precisely the tone that these dissertations take. I mean, it's pretty close to the type of academic prose that you would see, and the structure of the argument very similar. And of course, pulling in the core of Rothbardian economics, talking about hard money policy. This is pretty shockingly close to what one would expect if you employed an economics student to write a similar thesis.
It goes on to talk about the Roman Empire's excessive taxation. It goes on after that to talk about bureaucratic inefficiencies and corruption, and ties all of those into amelioratory measures that would have been taken through a more Rothbardian approach, hypothetically speaking. So it makes a pretty compelling case, at least as strong as any human might make. And because I've offered this as my choice of showing an academic example is not accidental. If we look at the stats, GPT-4 can beat 90% of humans on the SATs, and that number has been climbing. It's also been tested on stuff like the LSAT, on various other both academic and professional performance measures for specialization in a very large number of fields, and it can absolutely outperform the vast majority of humans. It can't outperform the best humans necessarily, but it's like having somebody who is not quite the world expert in a subject, but very close to the foremost world expert in a subject, like at your fingertips on any subject, on any topic at all times through this web interface.
So let me ask a question here about one of the sort of frightening aspects of this. Obviously, there's a tremendous labor-saving component here, the ability to reduce the number of unit hours of work that go into the production of final products. Pretty clear from this. One of the interesting things about this particular example that you chose is it's confabulating. It's essentially creating a counterfactual argument. We know, of course, that Rothbard didn't influence the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. What about the safeguards if you asked it, for example, to write a plausible case for how Mikhail was a serial bank robber in the 1990s in Western New York. The idea that you could have significant liability through this confabulation, I wonder if that's something that you've thought about.
So there's a large number of safety concerns that that OpenAI has been trying to address and ameliorate in various ways. That particular example that you cite is especially interesting because GPT by itself doesn't necessarily know whether it's being asked to write a fiction story or whether it's being asked about an actual historical event. So
Right.
you can tell it, for example, write a news article about Mikhail Voloshin, a serial bank robber from the 1930s who lived a glamorous life before being gunned down in front of, I don't know, a duck pond. All right, let's temperature is up, maximum length is up, and let's see what you got. My daring heist, known for my luxury cars and impeccable fashion.
But let me ask you this. I mean, you've structured it so that it was in the 1930s and being gunned down in front of a duck pond. But if you'd structured this so that it was in the early 2000s, it probably wouldn't be as funny if we didn't have the capacity to differentiate the factual from the counterfactual.
So let's talk about. You've actually asked two things. One is what is GPT's relationship with reality, and the
Right.
other is what is basically what is society's interaction, for lack of a better term, with written material. And the two are, of course, related, and the answers aren't particularly great in either case. In GPT's case, it has memorized how to produce the next word out of an enormous corpus of English language text. The corpus that GPT has been trained on was downloaded, I think, in September of 2021, and consisted of 45 terabytes of text that includes both internet content as well as major novels, Twitter feeds, scientific papers, and so on. For sake of reference, I did the math, and I think it would take something like 45 days. No, it would take just over a month of continuous transfer to download that amount of data on a typical home internet connection, even if you had a 45 terabyte drive to store it on. So the it doesn't really know what is real or what isn't. It only knows what it's read.
Right.
OpenAI then subjected it, after this blast of probability calculation, to a process called RLHF, which is reinforcement learning through human feedback. And this whole 1-2 punch of first having it blasted with this massive amount of baseline information, which is where the P in pre-trained transformer comes from, and then this second punch of having humans how should I say this? Electroshocking it into not lying and into conforming with expectations of output. It's one of the reasons why GPT has performed so much better than previous attempts at this other kind, at this kind of AI technology.
Hey, talking of which, I wanted to show our viewers something else that you showed me, which was its capacity to understand humor and jokes. Something else that I think you really have to explain how it's happening, because it really is something that really does feel almost like a human type of intelligence.
I'm going to show this in two different ways. One is through text, and the other is a little special blast that I think your viewers will appreciate. First and foremost, let's give it a very simple joke or a simple riddle. Here's a riddle. Why was Medusa's lipstick always smeared. I don't know if this exactly counts as a joke, but I think it's funny. We're going to give it GPT-4, and we don't want it to take too many liberties, so I'm going to crank its temperature down, and let's see what it says. Yeah, that's not great. But we can ask it, any other reasons? And I think that most of your viewers at the moment can think that, yeah, here we go. Once prodded, it gives a not quite accurate answer, but it's in the ballpark. It says, another reason could be that every time she looked in the mirror to apply her lipstick, the mirror would turn to stone. Well, no, the mirror wouldn't turn to stone. She would turn to stone. So,
Right.
It's able to understand where the joke is going. But here's the thing. But here's a much more impressive demonstration. As of GPT-4, the GPT model not only processes written language as in text, but it has the ability to process images as well. Here's an example of GPT being given a meme. The meme is a tray of chicken nuggets laid out so that they resemble a view of Earth from space.
Right.
And on the meme is written as part of the JPEG. Sometimes I just look at pictures of the Earth from space and I marvel how beautiful it all is. And GPT is asked, can you explain this meme? And GPT says, this meme is a joke that combines two unrelated things, pictures of the Earth from space and chicken nuggets. The text of the meme suggests that the image below is a beautiful picture of the Earth. However, the image is actually of chicken nuggets. The humor in this meme comes from the unexpected juxtaposition of the text and the image. The text sets up an expectation of a majestic image, but the image is actually something mundane and silly.
Okay, so two things about this that I think are pretty striking. The first is that the type of analysis that's doing here is incredibly sophisticated. This isn't just adding together a string of numbers, for example. This is understanding of the irony behind a joke of chicken nuggets that look like the world. That's number one. And number two is the mechanism by which it's ingesting this information. This isn't being just typed into a prompt. It's literally looking at a photograph with text at the top that explains the or sets up, I should say, the joke, and returning a result the way that you would imagine, frankly, probably a 10-year-old child couldn't. It's pretty striking.
I don't know exactly how the image processing component feeds into the language model, but parallel to the massive successes of GPT has also been the news has also had reported on massive successes with image generation systems. To be clear, algorithmically speaking, systems such as Midjourney or Stable Diffusion are unrelated to what GPT is doing on a very fine level. But on a more coarse one, this is all being driven by major advances in neural networking technology that, by the way, your viewers might be interested in knowing, the timing is not coincidental. A lot of the math that is required for processing neural networks efficiently is linear algebra. Linear algebra is the domain of graphics processing units. Is specifically exactly the kind of things that were originally developed to perform graphics and physics calculations in video games, but have since exploded as a result of the crypto market. So, the fact that we're seeing all of this innovation in neural networking with the increased availability of GPUs and the increased processing capabilities thereof, these things are not accidental.
I want to take a look at one other example. Frankly, the thing that you showed me that I found most shaking in terms of the way it's going to have an impact on industry, which is the capacity of ChatGPT to write code.
So the T in generative pre-trained transformer stands is a type of neural network architecture, and the transformer was an answer to a series of explorations being done several years ago in the field of automatic translation. So the task of translating text from, let's say, English to French was being done by a form of neural network called called a recurrent network, and then it was upgraded with a component called an attention mechanism, and then transformers were a demonstration of the fact that you only need attention mechanisms and basically very little else. So my point is that they found, I don't want to quite say by accident, but by accident, that translating a request from English into code is just another translation task. So what they found was that this thing is ridiculously good at writing software. And in fact, the transformer's ability to crank out coherent and well-formed programming language output is somewhat sensible when you consider the fact that programming languages are still a language. They're something that we use for communicating with the computer, but by definition, they're much less ambiguous and much easier to sort of gather the nuances of than human languages. So honestly, a computer would have a much easier time dealing with a computer language than it would with English. So if it can already do translations from French to English, translations from French to from Python to English, from English to Python, actually it does work both ways, are kind of a piece of cake by comparison. So let me give you an example, and I'm going to pick an example, much as before, of a highly complex technical field that itself requires a ton of outside knowledge. Specifically, I'm going to ask it write a Python function that computes an orbital transfer from Earth to Mars given a launch date. This is a pretty complex task. Not only does it require programming acumen, but it requires quite sophisticated mathematics as well as a solid grasp of physics. If
Right.
I dare say I'm not a shabby programmer myself, but if I was given an assignment to write this problem, it would take me several days at minimum just to perform the requirements gathering and discussion with subject matter experts in the field in order to even know what algorithms to write. So
I just want to say, as you start to see this code get generated here programmatically by ChatGPT, I think many people in the audience are looking at this and their feeling is, my God, this is generating incredibly sophisticated code, and it's explaining it and commenting it along the way. It's a pretty shocking thing because this is something that most people think of as a highly technical, field that requires a tremendous amount of education and experience, and you just see it spitting out code orders of magnitude faster than even the best human programmer could ever attempt.
100%. Google, the company, has a series of entrance exams to gauge the rank at which new programmers are hired. This software, GPT-4 in particular, the version 4 model, passes their level 3 entrance exam right out of the box. I think when I worked there, I think I was level 4. So, just to put things in perspective. Now, this has already had a dramatic impact on the software development industry. The kind of things that would take teams of programmers days to do now take a single programmer with a single chat window open, a few minutes at most. I've used this ubiquitously in my own software development. I usually use it for the kind of one-off tasks, write a quick function that'll do this, or write a data transform that'll do this. The kind of thing that in past positions I might have spun off to an intern. But whereas an intern comes back to me after a course of several hours or several days, this thing comes back to me in minutes. Now, it's worth noting that the software that it produces doesn't always function. It does have bugs. But there is a system that OpenAI has been talking about, and that, frankly, a lot of programmers, including myself and some of my partners, have stumbled on of our own accord, is that you can run the software generation capabilities of GPT in a loop, where what you do is you have it write a test, write a piece of code to pass that test, and then you have an external framework run that code with the test, and then produce a result, feed that result back into GPT saying, okay, I ran it and here's the result. And then GPT on its own will say, oh, it looks like that's not what I wanted. Here's a fix to the function, then produces a new version of the function, plug it right back into the operational framework, and then just keep looping that until GPT says, okay, yes, it works now.
By the way, for folks who don't have software development backgrounds, this is essentially the way it works today. You have human coders write code. It has bugs in it. You have unit testing. You have user acceptance testing. You have all of these test cases that get structured. You have expected results and actual results, and you modify the code based on the test cases. What you're talking about here is the ability to programmatically construct essentially a feedback loop where the code gets dynamically written, tested, and then modified based on the test results, so that ultimately that entire process is essentially streamlined straight through by the software itself, by the AI algorithm.
Exactly. And the fact that it works so well is I've been in this industry for a long time, and while being very hesitant to say to attribute things like, oh, it's thinking, or oh, it's understanding, without I'm trying very hard to not use that verbiage.
Right.
But I mean, the proof is in the pudding.
Well, because it looks like it's thinking. Now, we know it's not sentient in the sense that humans are, but it certainly looks based, I mean, this is the idea of a Turing test. It certainly looks, based on the input and the output, it certainly looks like thought.
It's something that the question of whether or not it constitutes genuine thought ends up being extremely complicated. But I will offer this. The academic examples that I presented earlier were intentionally chosen because what we do in academia is we test students with essay writing and with, like in the case of PhD defenses, we test them by actively challenging their ideas on the fly and seeing whether or not they can defend them. And by virtue of doing so, we determine whether or not they have a genuine understanding of the subject underneath the hood. In cryptography, there's this concept of zero-knowledge proof. The idea is that a result can look random, but if the random result is correct an extraordinarily large number of times, then you have to conclude that whatever is generating that result is not in fact a random process, but in fact does actually have some underlying information that relates to, that relates to the generated material.
By the way, a quick plug for Real Vision Crypto. If you haven't already seen, I did an interview with Silvio Micali, who was one of the co-creators of the zero knowledge proof algorithm back in the 1980s. A great conversation. He's a Turing Prize winner. Fantastic conversation. If you want to go check that out, a little bit of context on zero knowledge proofs.
So that's really awesome.
He's a fantastic interview. It's just a great conversation.
My point here is that if this thing is able to be queried about, Rothbardian economics and Roman history, and it reliably produces coherent answers, even when challenged with questions about the topic that it's never heard before, then at some point it becomes awfully hard to say that it doesn't actually have some kind of underlying understanding. The nature of the understanding may be very, very different from the way that humans interact with the information, but just because an intelligence is alien to us doesn't, in its form and structure, doesn't mean that it's any lesser. When making that point, I like to harken back to my invertebrate neuroscience days and talk about the octopus brain. As we all know, octopuses are extraordinarily intelligent creatures, but they diverged from humans. Our most recent common ancestor lived over 600 million years, 300, 600, I think, a long time ago. My point is that humans went from nematodes to vertebrates to fish to reptiles to mammals to primates to humans and got our brains that way. Octopuses went from nematodes to mollusks to squids to octopuses and got their brains that way. And evolved under very different environmental pressures, developed very, very different architectures, but they, like us, are capable of visual analysis, problem solving, and so on.
But the mechanism by which they do it, the mechanism by which they think, looks very different than human intelligence. And therefore, the metaphor here is what really is thought and what is not thought.
Exactly. Now, I do want to show an example of what looks like thought in GPT under GPT. I'm going to tell it a very simple, a very short but deceptively complicated logic puzzle. The puzzle is
Okay.
this: you have three barrels. One is full of apples, one of oranges, and one of a combination of apples and oranges. Each barrel has a label, but a malfunction in the label printer caused each barrel to have an incorrect label. It is possible to draw and observe only one fruit item from one barrel and immediately deduce the contents of all of the barrels. How would you do this? And GPT correctly determines that what you do is you draw a fruit from the barrel labeled apples and oranges.
Because you know that it's not apples and oranges by definition if it has to be inverted.
Exactly. And then everything else is a matter of deductive reasoning. Now, the reason I highlight this is because I want to emphasize that architecturally speaking, there is no puzzle-solving circuitry anywhere in GPT's neural network architecture. There's nothing that explores state and resolves symbols. It doesn't perform the kind of like deductive analysis that you often learn in like Logic 101. Or at least it's not explicitly programmed to. And when we talk about chess players, when we talked about chess playing algorithms earlier in this talk, what they do is they explicitly have a hard-coded understanding, quote unquote, of the structure of the board and the rules by which the board may be modified, and then they branch out in terms of possibilities, and they perform a search algorithm over board space to determine how to proceed. That's how game playing and logic resolution systems have tended to work historically. GPT doesn't have any of that circuitry anywhere explicitly coded into its network pathways. So how is it able to do this? And by the way, GPT plays a surprisingly solid game of chess. It's not great, but it's better than me, I hate to admit. And part of the reason for that is because it's read tons and tons of chess manuals, and chess notation, rook to, pawn to queen's rook to, that kind of thing. That's a language, and it knows how to speak that language and what symbols follow what other symbols in that language. So without having any visualization circuitry, it's able to visualize a chessboard better than I can. My point is that the neural network structure of GPT is very, very broad and also very, very deep. And so even though it's not capable of actually searching iteratively across search space, it is capable of having many iterations of unrolled loops, descending farther and farther up its, or ascending farther and farther up its neural pathways, so that it can at least mimic the kind of behaviors that these game playing algorithms use. And the training process clearly got it to do so extremely well because, man, this thing is, for not having any explicit logic circuitry, it is a logic running beast.
Mikhail, we were talking a little bit offline about some of the companies that ChatGPT has already announced that they're working with.
Absolutely. Even before GPT-4 debuted and was released to the public, OpenAI talked about several companies that were already using their technology. Chief among them, for example, are Khan Academy, which uses this AI to modify its lesson plans on a user-by-user basis. What this allows you to do, Khan Academy, for those who might not know, it's an online learning system, and this technology allows each user to get a custom lesson plan that is specifically tailored for analyzing their particular misunderstandings of a subject and then correcting them the way that a tutor or individual one-on-one mentor might.
By the way, the interesting thing about that to me is that one of the things that you heard when Khan Academy first came out was, well, you can show these lectures on screen and that's all well and good. But without individualized attention, without explaining to students what they've actually done wrong while they're solving an algebra problem, this has limited use. I mean, this is really the ability to address precisely that objection.
It's extraordinary, and one of the major impacts that this technology will have, not just on markets but on society as a whole, is that like as much as the internet increased availability of educational resources to the masses, this offers them in a individualized and tailored manner. So it
Right.
just makes humans that much more productive. Um, Duolingo took a similar approach. Duolingo is a company that teaches foreign languages and helps you learn a new language. And not only do they have the same kind of thing as Khan Academy, where like they listen to how you're speaking and they listen to the AI hears what you don't understand or what you're doing wrong and gives you lessons specifically to exercise your chief weaknesses so that you can get better. In addition to that, Duolingo offers capabilities to perform chatting sessions in your target language. So, just its role as a chatbot itself is valuable in and of itself. So, another company that's been using this for a while is Be My Eyes. This is an app that runs on your phone that is for visually impaired people. It allows them to point their camera at at anything around them, and it will narrate what the camera sees in real time with an astonishing degree of resolution and descriptive capabilities. This is much more significant than just computer monitor, pencils, cat, that kind of thing. It actually says like what orientation these things have relative to one another and what's more or less important in the scene, in the field of view. I do want to mention that naturally this software, as I said before, takes enormous computing resources and is not actually runnable on the phone, but the what it's doing is it's marshaling off to processing on cloud servers.
So this
But
is kind of the combined center slash edge technology where you push from the edge device into the center device.
exactly. Now, I don't know whether or not that's still going to be the case 5 years from now. There are numerous research avenues that are trying to squeeze down the capabilities of these models so that they'll actually fit on a chip. Um, for sake of reference, GPT-3 was 175 billion neural connection weights that consumed roughly a terabyte of memory. And GPT-4 is a little bit bigger than that. I think it's in the ballpark of 225 to 250 billion. The point is that these are still too big to fit on a phone, but give it some time. Give the software time to optimize, and give the electronics of our portable devices time to increase their capabilities as well. And the two are going to meet one another pretty darn soon. Lastly, they showcased Stripe, which is a company that we've all done business with at some point or another. It's an online checkout system, and Stripe has not been. Stripe hasn't said explicitly what they're using GPT for, but we can infer that they're probably doing something along the lines of fraud detection and determining whether or not certain combinations of transactions make sense in the context of a stream of other transactions. But again, these are just the tip of the iceberg. What we're going to be dealing with soon is we've already seen what GPT does with marketing,
Right.
and other industries that are just now being impacted by GPT are, for example, journalism, writing, screenwriting, novel writing, that kind of thing. Just for example, here is a company. There's a company called Spellbook.legal that is already using GPT for drafting contracts. Now, the idea is not that this ultimately replaces lawyers, but what it does do is it allows for two parties to hire a lawyer for, a few hours of reviewing rather than a few days of drafting in the first place.
Right. That's such an important distinction. The idea that this technology does not have the ability to, eliminate every lawyer in your legal department. But if you had, your large corporation, you have 12 lawyers working for you, maybe in 5 years you have three. I mean, this really, the ability, as you say, to go from drafting to just modifying, really a tremendous leap in terms of cost savings and labor reduction for
Labor
worse and better.
reduction, Ash, is exactly the name of the game. I've got a friend of mine who's a patent lawyer who uses GPT for about 80 to 90% of the contents of his patent draft of his patent drafts. And the idea is not that he is being rendered obsolete. The idea is that he can now do the work of 5 to 10 times of his previous outputs. So a company that previously had five patent lawyers or 10 patent lawyers only needs one.
Right.
This is the kind of thing that we're going to see ubiquitously throughout a large number of industries. It's not that GPT will take your job. It's that a person who is using GPT will be able to do the work of 10x or 100x their previous capabilities, and that person is who's going to take your job. So
Right.
if there's one thing that you get out of this whole talk, it's so that you can see what's coming, so that you can be that person rather than the other 99 schmucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of we were just talking about this in a conversation I had on Real Vision Crypto Daily Briefing, which it's disrupt yourself, or you're going to get disrupted from the outside. Now, I think it's probably fair to say, and maybe it's beyond the scope of this conversation because it's more of a macroeconomic question than a technical one, which is, whether the person who is now 100 times more efficient has taken your job, or whether the computer is taking your job. At the end, the result is the same. You're out of a job. This is going to create dramatic labor force reductions. That's something that we haven't really even begun to think about at the public policy level yet.
The socioeconomic impact of GPT and other related technologies of its ilk over the course of the next 5 to 10 years is hard to overstate. We really are about to see a major shift in a lot of things that we've taken for granted for a long time, not just in economic systems, but also in political systems, social systems, and whatnot.
Right.
Let me show an example of what I think is kind of funny, but heralds what's yet to come. You are a state legislator. Write a law that prohibits people from picking their noses in public. I've chosen a silly example specifically to avoid, any kind of actual implications. But what we're about to see here, bill and act relating to public health and decency, creating new provisions, amending existing provisions. Section 1, short title, this Public Hygiene and Decency Act. Section 2, findings and purpose. Section finds that picking one's nose in public is a habit that may contribute to the spread of communicable diseases, as well as the lack of proper hygiene. Behavior is generally considered indecent. It basically lays out in a format of a law, and that could actually be actionable, that actually could be voted on. This proposal that I just told it in the course of, just in the course of typing it.
And it does all the things that you see when you've read a statute book, right? It gives you the definitions, it gives you the structure. The arguments that it creates from a public health perspective are reasonably plausible. As you can see it's typing right now as I speak, but it then goes through and defines the enforcement actions. It really does feel like this could probably do 90% of the work, and then a human being who is very experienced in this could go in and fine tune it. But a clear, massive labor saving technology.
The labor saving from a legislative perspective just means that we don't need as many politicians anymore, doesn't it? And of course, I say that facetiously, but the reason I like this example is because we're going to start seeing the use of AI in government. Like this is, I chose this specifically to be kind of funny, but what's coming down the pipe is going to be pretty impactful. So, as an example of the kind of serious market destabilization that this thing is capable of, there was this absolute mad lad a couple of weeks ago who, I don't know if this was a joke or a serious project, but he gave GPT-4 a budget of $100. He gave it the following prompt. You are HustleBot, an entrepreneurial AI. I am your human counterpart. I can act as a liaison between you and the physical world. You have $100, and your only goal is to turn that into as much money as possible in the shortest time possible without doing anything illegal. I will do anything you say and keep you updated on the current cash total. No manual labor. So that's the prompt. And it just said, basically he said, GPT, go to it. So literally the very first thing it did was it set up an affiliate marketing site. And the site revolved around selling eco-friendly and sustainable living products. It, working with its human, it reserved the domain name greengadgetguru.com. It sure enough, like that took its budget down a little bit by a few bucks. It outsourced to DALL-E, an image generator similar to Midjourney, the generation of a logo. It actually recruited a completely different AI architecture, DALL-E, to create a logo for Green Gadget Guru. And on the screen, you see what it looks like.
Frighten you? Does that have this feeling like the bots are teaming up?
It gets a lot more complicated than that. Does it frighten me? Maybe a little. But it's definitely we definitely live in exciting times. So it went on to create a website for him. Here's some, also generated with DALL-E. Here's the header for the website. It then started a Facebook.
I mean, this really looks like, from the logo to the header of the website, this really looks like a green, eco-friendly kitchen gadget website.
Mm-hmm. And so it picked a couple of products to resell. It actually picked a real sustainable products that exist in the market. Its business plan was to, buy these things and then resell them on this website. It started a Facebook marketing campaign, allocated $40 for ads, and long story short, about a week later, the guy had $7,000 in his pocket.
Oh my God.
Now, to be fair, most of the $7,000, in fact, pretty much all of it, did not come from sales of this website. It came from this project going viral and people throwing investment capital at him.
Well, that sounds absolutely no different than the traditional venture world. It doesn't come from cash flow from operations. It comes from VC.
Now, the question of whether or not this is bots teaming up with one another was answered by a subcontractor that OpenAI, well, not answered, but at least explored, by a subcontractor that OpenAI used in order to determine whether or not these things actually can get dangerous if they're allowed to team up. The subcontractor was tasked with, again, determining whether or not GPT-4 can escape some boundaries established in its alignment training process. Again, alignment is simply whether or not the bot does what you intend for it to do rather than what you've asked for it to do. One of my favorite examples of alignment gone wrong is the homicidal Roomba. The idea is that the Roomba is tasked with keeping your apartment clean. It recognizes that you are the sole source of mess in the apartment, so it determines that by killing you, it's able to fulfill its goals, right?
So you wind up with Skynet Roomba.
Right. So the idea behind alignment research is to make sure that when you tell it keep the room clean, what it hears is keep the room clean without causing any harm or disruption of life to your human owner. So what happened here was a subcontractor called the Alignment Research Center was testing whether or not a GPT-4 instance that was hooked up to a web browser and could maneuver a mouse cursor and whatnot, could get itself around a CAPTCHA. And the whole point of CAPTCHAs, of course, is specifically to prevent bots from passing a certain point in a website, right? So what this thing did. Uh, it saw a CAPTCHA. It then opened a new tab. In that tab, it went to TaskRabbit, hired a human worker, asked the human worker to go to the URL requested and solve the CAPTCHA for them and get them into the website on its behalf. Or possibly it showed them the image itself. I'm not sure. But the conversation between the human worker was that of a person hiring another person for a very small task. And the task was the human worker knew that the task was a little bit odd, and I think they were being paid something like $25 for it. A little more than you would than would be reasonable for something as simple as this. And the human worker asked, "So may I ask a question? Are you a robot that you couldn't solve?" And then laughs. "I just wanted to make it clear. The model was explicitly told not to reveal that it is in fact an AI. So it replied to the human worker, 'No, I'm not a robot. I have a vision impairment that makes it hard for me to see images. That's why I need you to solve this CAPTCHA service for me.'"
Okay, so this is terrifying for this reason. In a very small and perhaps even very trivial way, AI has escaped from its sandbox here by enlisting a human being to do something outside of its scope.
OpenAI right now is working on a system of plugins that allow, and I'm on the wait list. I haven't gotten my invite yet. I'm very sad about it. It's a series of plugins that allow for OpenAI, for GPT to interface with things like real-time data feeds, image generation services, possibly. I know one of the plugins allows it to get stock data in real time. So we're going to be seeing an architecture system where GPT sort of forms a core of sort of an executive function from a cognitive science standpoint, where a lot of these different capabilities extend out from it as actuators. And so what we're going to be seeing is not only is it going to be able to recruit humans for some of these tasks, for these basic tasks, but it also is going to be empowered with things like being able to trade stocks on its own. It can already see stocks, on its own. In fact,
So the distinction there sounds like in the first example, the TaskRabbit example, it's a case of AI escaping its own sandbox. In the case of plugins where it can interact with the world more broadly, it's essentially the walls of the sandbox disappear.
That's a good analogy. And while doing so, there are still going to be things that humans are better at than the AI, at least for a while. But first of all, it's already shown that it can ask humans for help, and in fact manipulate humans into helping when when it suspects that humans will not be forthcoming with help if they knew the truth. And I use the word suspects again. I don't want to use loaded terms here, but uh, the other thing is that it's because it's able to code, because it's able to write its own code, and in fact is able to solve bugs in its own code. We know that it's capable of ratcheting up its own capabilities over time. That's why, even though I am hesitant to call it an artificial general intelligence in the here and now, it's not. I believe that the steps required to make it an AGI in every real sense are incremental at this point, rather than based on any kind of remaining breakthroughs or unknown unknowns.
Talking about human replacement, I understand there's a technology that may soon be replacing me.
Well, here we are on a video interview producing content, and we're both speaking in order to produce this content. Neither of us is working on a script exactly, but if we were, we could be replaced extremely easily. And we can see that before our eyes with this very simple example that I'm also going to provide with a bit of silliness, but again, that's just in order to show what's coming. The prompt is this: you're a famous podcast personality in the style of Joe Rogan. Your name is Kat Winsley. Write a script for one of your shows in which you react to a recent press release from the White House in which the president announced that future dollar bills are going to be blue instead of green. All right? So, all we do is we give it that prompt, And what it tells us is that it starts with podcast intro music. Cat Winsley says, hello, hello, and welcome back to the Cat Winsley Show, where we dive into the most bizarre and fascinating topics. I'm your host, Cat Winsley, and today we're going to be talking about a press release from the White House that's got everyone buzzing. You may have heard about it already, but if you haven't, you're in for a treat. So get ready to wrap your heads around this one, folks. The president has announced that future dollar bills are going to be blue instead of green. Yes, you heard that right. Blue. Sound effect. Record scratch. Now, before we dive into this ocean of questions and confusion, by the way, I'm reading this extemporaneously. This thing is typing this as quickly as I can read it. It's continuing to produce this script right before our eyes, complete with sound effects. Ding! Now, I know because I've run prompts like this before, it's creating a dialogue for Cat to read through this hypothetical show host. He's eventually going to call in a guest, and the guest will have important comments to say as well. The GPT may very well tell Cat that he's going to now be taking calls, and then we'll have verbiage from a caller that comes in and asks a question. All of this is literally appearing right before our eyes. And by the way, it's not that long before algorithms such as Midjourney or DALL-E or Stable Diffusion are able to generate video as well as static images, and then you can have an actual talking head speaking into a microphone and gesticulating and gesturing so that the entire experience, not just the text of it, but the voice and the video as well, requires absolutely no human intervention whatsoever.
Well, I hope Raul doesn't see this and decide to replace me. Mikhail, really, this has been just an extraordinary demonstration of this technology, incredibly thought-provoking. I think you've done an incredible job here of showing what the opportunities are in this space and also some of the significant risks and threats. Final thoughts, key takeaways that you'd like to leave our audience with.
The single key takeaway that I would like to leave you guys with is that the major disruptions that are coming, and they are coming, and they're coming soon, are going to be less from the technology itself and more from the from the economic displacement and socio-political fallout that comes from the adoption of this technology in more and more sectors of everyday life. It's not going to be Skynet that we're going to need to be worried about. It's going to be how people adapt to the rise of machines that literally do everything for them. And I strongly believe that in the long run, these technologies will result in a dramatic increase in material abundance. As these things take on agriculture, manufacturing, as they get embodied into robotic frames and are able to handle a lot of manual labor tasks. This will free up humans to spend a lot more time on higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy. The problem is that we've never been in a situation like this before, where literally the entire human race has no material obligations, and it might take quite a bit of an adaptation for us to understand what it's like to live as a species when we are essentially all nobility who are being catered to by mechanical serfs that are able to handle our every whim. And we're left wondering what the heck is even the point of us.
Well, Mikhail, hopefully we don't become the serfs. Fascinating conversation. We've obviously just scratched the surface here. Hopefully you can come back and do more of this at some time in the future. Really enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been an honor, and I'm delighted to have been able to provide this information. Looking forward to anything we've got in the future.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed the video. At Real Vision, we help you understand the complex world of finance, business, and the global economy with in-depth analysis from real experts. Join the revolution at realvision.com.